They told me I was the embarrassment of the family. At Thanksgiving dinner, in front of everyone, my father said I'd wasted my life on that silly tech stuff. Then he kicked me out. What he didn't know, I'd just sold my cybersecurity company for $188 million. For years, I'd secretly paid their bills, bailed them out, saved them from bankruptcy, all while they laughed behind my back. That night, something inside me snapped, and I decided for the first time ever to stop saving people who never saw my worth. This is what happened when I walked away, for good. I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' colonial mansion, the late afternoon sun glinting off the fleet of luxury vehicles already parked outside. Dad's Mercedes, Blake's Porsche, even Sophie's white BMW convertible. My 10-year-old Honda looked painfully out of place, tucked behind the hedge like an unwanted guest. I killed the engine, took a deep breath, and reached for the bottle of wine I'd brought, a 1978 Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Not that anyone would appreciate it. Inside, the house buzzed with curated elegance. A string quartet played softly in the background, and the scent of truffle oil and rosemary drifted from the catering staff, weaving between rooms. My mother's voice, high and polished, rose above the murmurs. "Emma, you're here." She offered me 2 air kisses and a perfumed cloud of Chanel No. 5. Her eyes didn't touch mine. "Darling, Marta will take that," she said, gesturing to the bottle in my hand. I opened my mouth to explain the wine's rarity, its history, how I'd acquired it from a private auction in France. But she was already calling across the room to Sophie. The bottle was whisked away without a glance, handed to a housekeeper who looked about as uncomfortable as I felt. I stood alone in the grand entryway, the polished marble beneath my feet, cold, even through my boots. No one looked up. No one greeted me. I could have been another member of the catering staff for all they cared. The dining room was set like a magazine spread, burnished gold flatware, name cards in calligraphy, crystal glasses catching the candlelight. I searched the table for my place and found it near the end, wedged between Cousin Drew, who once tried to sell me an NFT over lunch, and someone's college-aged boyfriend I didn't recognise. At the far end of the table, in the centre of all attention, sat Blake and Sophie. Blake was mid-story, gesturing grandly, his Rolex catching the light with each movement. "We're closing the deal next quarter," he boomed. "A mid-size acquisition, but high impact. Dad's trusting me to lead negotiations." Cheers erupted. Someone clapped him on the back. My father raised his glass, beaming. "That's my son." Sophie chimed in with her own announcement. "Christopher and I set the wedding date, next June at the Gardens. Invitations are already in design." Her fingers sparkled with a ring that could fund a scholarship program. Gasps of delight rippled around the table. My mother dabbed her eyes, overwhelmed by the perfection of it all. No one asked me anything, not about work, not about life, not even if I was seeing anyone. I could have been a ghost, and the ghost would have gotten more attention. The appetizers came and went. Conversations circled around IPOs, country clubs, destination weddings, and charity boards. I sipped water and tried to smile, though my cheeks ached with the effort. Then came the moment that sealed the ache in my chest. My mother returned from the kitchen, holding a glass of wine. She sipped, then frowned. "Marta," she called out, "please switch this out." Whatever that bottle was, too earthy. Bring up one of the Napa cabs. My gaze dropped to the ruby swirl in her glass. The 1978 Lafite. She hadn't even realised. I felt my throat tighten, the room suddenly too warm, my skin prickling with the weight of invisibility. All that effort, all that thought for nothing. Just like always, I was their daughter and I didn't exist. I wasn't always invisible. As a child, I was loud with curiosity, questions, and daydreams. But loud didn't suit the Reynolds image. Blake was the golden boy from the moment he was born. My father enrolled him in elite prep schools, signed him up for golf at 6, and brought him along to investment luncheons before he hit puberty. By high school, Blake was already shadowing my father's associates on Wall Street internships. He was tall, charming, good at exactly the things that earn praise in our family: money, image, power. Sophie, the baby of the family, was a porcelain doll groomed for social perfection. Ballet at 5, pageants at 7, debutante galas by 16. My mother paraded her like a trophy, always commenting on her posture, her smile, her flawless skin. "She's a star," she would whisper at events, just like I was at her age. And me? I was the anomaly. While my siblings charmed and sparkled, I spent my time dismantling computers and reading about algorithms. I liked solitude. I liked logic. I didn't like being told who I was supposed to be. I still remember the first time my father looked truly disappointed in me. I was 10 and I'd skipped the family's charity brunch to enter a coding competition at the community college. I won first place. When I showed him the trophy, he barely glanced up from his Wall Street journal. "Maybe next time you'll try something that matters," he muttered. That was the beginning. I kept winning quietly. Robotics fairs, science awards, a state scholarship for a security app I built in high school. But no matter what I achieved, it wasn't what they wanted. My mother called it nerd stuff. My father called it hobbies. When I got the acceptance letter from Stanford, I cried alone in my room. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I knew what was coming. The scholarship was full ride, tuition, room, board. All I needed was my parents' signature on a few documents. When I brought them the packet, my father smiled for the first time in weeks. "Stanford, that's respectable," he said, flipping through the pages. "Business school?" "No," I replied. "Computer science." The smile vanished. "Emma," he said flatly, "we've discussed this. Your hobbies are charming, but you need to think of the long term. Business, finance, management, that's how real legacies are built." My mother chimed in, clutching her pearls like I'd sworn at the table. "What will people think? A Reynolds girl buried in code with the geeks?" They insisted I enroll in management science. My father had already called a friend in the Stanford GSB alumni circle to arrange introductions. So I nodded. I signed the documents. I packed my bags, and I lied. The moment I arrived in California, I walked into the registrar's office and changed my major. I didn't tell them. I didn't ask for permission. I was 18 and exhausted from pretending to be someone I wasn't. The first semester was hell. I had to work 2 part-time jobs to cover expenses the scholarship didn't include. I ate ramen for weeks. I missed Thanksgiving that year. Not that anyone noticed. But for the first time in my life, I was doing something that felt like mine. By sophomore year, I had a patent pending on a mobile encryption protocol. By junior year, I started drafting the blueprint for what would later become my company. But back home, I was still the difficult child, the one who refused to listen, the one who was so smart, but such a shame. I carried that label into adulthood, quietly, patiently, until now. After Stanford, I didn't take a job at a Fortune 500 company like my classmates. I rented a studio apartment in Palo Alto with peeling paint and a leaky faucet and started building. My startup had no funding, no team, no flashy pitch deck. Just me, a salvaged laptop, and a stack of code scribbled in notebooks. It wasn't glamorous. I lived off instant noodles, rode a second-hand bike, and took freelance gigs fixing corporate security breaches just to make rent. No investors would take a solo female founder seriously, especially one working out of a studio that smelled faintly of mildew. Every time I called home, it was the same conversation. "Still playing around with your little computer business?" my father would ask, half laughing. "You know, Emma," my mother once said, "you could come home, work at your father's firm. Blake needs an assistant now that he's managing client portfolios." An assistant. "I'm fine," I told them every time. "I'm building something. Let us know when it's real," Blake would chime in if he happened to be on speaker. "Or if you need help with your taxes or something." But I kept building. By year 2, I had a prototype. It was crude but promising, an adaptive algorithm that predicted network intrusions before they happened, using behavioral patterns rather than traditional firewall responses. It was smart, fast, and light years ahead of what the market offered. I named the company Sentinel Layer and filed for LLC status. Still, I had no co-founder, no mentor, no family cheerleaders, just silence and skepticism. Then, one weekend, out of the blue, Sophie called. "Hey Em," she chirped, "how's the whole hacker thing going?" I rolled my eyes, but smiled. It was rare for her to reach out without a birthday or holiday reminder. "It's cybersecurity, but thanks. It's going okay." She paused. "I actually need a favour, tiny one." I stiffened slightly. "What kind of favour?" "Just some paperwork. Nothing huge. Chris and I are refinancing the condo. Well, it's a long story, but I need someone to co-sign something temporarily." "You've got great credit and it's just a technicality. Our financial advisor said it wouldn't affect anything on your end." I hesitated. "You want me to co-sign a loan?" "Not really co-sign. It's more like authorising the process so we don't have to delay closing. I'll remove your name as soon as the paperwork clears, I swear." Something in me flinched. I'd spent years scraping by on my own. No one in my family had offered me a single dollar or ounce of support. And now my sister needed a signature. But she sounded so sincere and desperate, and for some reason, despite everything, I still wanted her to trust me, to need me. "Okay," I said finally, "send me the forms." A courier arrived the next day. I skimmed the pages, lengthy, technical, but full of standard boilerplate language. I signed where marked and sent them back. I didn't hear from Sophie again for a month. When she finally texted, it was to thank me. "You saved us. Seriously. Drinks on me next time we're in the same city. Love ya." I didn't think much of it. I had bigger things to worry about. My code was attracting attention. Small tech blogs wrote about Sentinel Layer. A few medium-sized companies reached out for demos. I presented at a cybersecurity symposium in San Diego and left with 2 term sheets from angel investors. Things were finally shifting. But something else had shifted too. And I wouldn't find out for months what that signature had really cost me. The turning point came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was elbows deep in debugging a line of code when I got the email. Subject line, "Potential Strategic Acquisition, Confidential." At first, I thought it was spam, but the sender's domain caught my eye. Ethereum Systems, a global cybersecurity giant. They'd been watching Sentinel Layer for months, the message said, monitoring our releases, testing our public-facing modules. They were impressed. 3 weeks later, I was in a high-rise boardroom in San Francisco, presenting to a team of stone-faced executives. I thought they'd tear me apart, question my credentials, laugh at my solo founder status. Instead, their VP of Innovation slid a folder across the table and said, "We want it." We want you. The offer was surreal, 188 million, a structured buyout with retention bonuses and advisory roles. All the years of silence, doubt and ramen dinners, all of it suddenly quantified in 8 digits. But there was a clause. Ethereum wanted complete brand control post-acquisition, which included anonymity for the original founder. They'd phase out the Sentinel Layer name, fold the tech into their core products, and absorb the intellectual property. In return, I'd get the payout, quietly. It was exactly what I'd dreamed of, and completely unceremonious. I signed. I didn't tell anyone, not Blake, not Sophie, not even my mother. I changed nothing about my life. I still lived in my 1-bedroom apartment. I still drove the same old Honda. My wardrobe remained mostly hoodies and jeans. But behind the scenes, things did change. I hired a financial advisor and opened 5 LLCs to handle different portfolios. I bought a cabin in Vermont under a shell name, just in case I ever needed real peace. I started a scholarship fund for young women in STEM and signed every check as the Helix Trust. And then I began helping my family. Sophie called crying about credit card debt. I arranged for an anonymous grant to Sophie Whitman Interiors. Blake was nearly foreclosed on. An angel investor stepped in through a holding group to restructure his mortgage. Even my parents weren't left out. I had their property taxes reassessed, paid off the overdue bills via anonymous donation, and quietly ensured their electricity was never turned off again. It was absurd, really. The failure child saving the dynasty without applause, without acknowledgement, without even basic recognition. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Emma," she said, her tone unusually warm, "you won't believe it. We've had the most incredible stroke of luck." "Oh?" I replied, cautious. "Some anonymous donor covered our landscaping debt. And the taxes too. The accountant said it was a clerical error, but I know better. It's fate. God's grace, really. We're so blessed." She laughed, a light tinkling sound, and for a brief moment I imagined telling her the truth. I imagined her going silent on the other end, stunned, maybe even proud, but then she said, "Maybe this means Blake can focus on the promotion now, and Sophie can stop worrying about appearances. Our family deserves this kind of abundance, don't you think? Deserves." I bit my tongue. "Yes, Mom," I said, "very lucky." I hung up and sat in silence, surrounded by things they'd never understand. Whiteboards covered in systems architecture, framed patents, a dusty plaque from the Stanford AI Institute. My name wasn't on any of their lips, but their lives were floating, thanks to mine. The Thanksgiving dinner continued as if nothing had shifted, because for everyone else, nothing had. Blake was in his element, gesturing with one hand while holding a glass of aged scotch in the other. "We finalised the deal on the Westridge portfolio," he said to a captivated group of uncles and second cousins. "Mid-level assets, but scalable potential. Honestly, I might just acquire a tech startup next. You know, something small and scrappy, cheap buyout, easy integration." He chuckled. "Heard about this one in Palo Alto that's tanked lately. Might pick it up for scraps." I blinked. He was talking about Sentinel Layer. My Sentinel Layer. The same company that had been bought for 188 million and quietly folded into Ethereum. The one I'd built from scratch. Now he wanted to buy it, unaware that it had already been acquired by the company I sold it to. I didn't say anything. Sophie, across the room, was showing off her engagement ring like she was auditioning for a reality show. 3 carats, she sang. Cushion cut. Christopher insisted. He said anything smaller would be an insult. Aunt Julia gasped in admiration. "He's a catch. Your parents must be over the moon." "Oh, they are," Sophie replied, tossing her hair. Mum says I'm finally bringing honour back to the Reynolds name. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't just forgotten. I was the stain. I stood by the dessert table, clutching a half-full glass of wine, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. Someone brushed past me to get more pumpkin pie. No eye contact, no "excuse me." It was as if I didn't exist. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. My father rose from his seat at the head of the table, lifted his glass, and tapped it gently with a spoon. "Everyone," he said, "before the turkey coma sets in, I'd like to say a few words." Chairs scooted back. Conversations dimmed. I'm proud, immensely proud, of what our family has accomplished this year. Blake's leadership at the firm has brought in over $14 million in new capital. Sophie's engagement to Christopher, well, I couldn't have picked a better match myself. This family is growing stronger, more respected, more powerful. He looked around the table, beaming. My name didn't come up. Not even a passing mention. I waited. Maybe he'd say something generic. And to Emma for continuing her work in tech. But he didn't. In fact, he turned and looked at me for the first time that evening. And Emma, he said, lips curling into what might have been a smirk. Still at that computer job? There was laughter, light, cruel. Sophie snorted into her wineglass. A cousin giggled. I opened my mouth to reply, to say something neutral, polite. But my father wasn't done. You know, he added, voice carrying clearly, you've got potential. If you ever decide to join the real world, there might still be a spot for you at the firm. Of course, we'd have to train you up properly, but it's never too late to become useful. There it was. Useful. I set my glass down. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but something deeper. Grief, maybe. Grief for the version of me that still hoped this year would be different. That maybe, just maybe, they'd see me. They didn't. They never had. The room had quieted after my father's jab, the kind of polite hush that follows a socially acceptable insult. I looked around at the faces I'd grown up with, smiling, smirking, sipping wine. My mother was already chatting with Sophie about wedding florals, as if nothing had happened. Then, something inside me shifted. I stood. The scraping of my chair echoed louder than expected. A few heads turned. Most didn't bother. I sold my company last month, I said, voice steady, for $188 million. The silence was immediate, sharp. Blake blinked. Sophie stopped mid-sentence. My father froze, glass halfway to his lips. Then came the laughter, first from Blake. What? You sold a blog? A chuckle from a cousin. Was this on eBay? Sophie rolled her eyes. Emma, don't be weird. My mother's brows furrowed slightly. Darling, she said, standing as if to usher me back into place. This really isn't the time for your fantasies. Let's not make this about you, okay? I didn't move. I'm not making anything up, I replied, calm. I built a cybersecurity platform called Sentinel Layer. It was acquired by Ethereum Systems for $188 million. The deal closed 3 weeks ago. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded document, just 1 page. The sale confirmation, redacted to protect the sensitive terms, but clear in the essentials. I walked it over and set it gently in front of my father. He scanned it. His face didn't change, but his hand gripped the paper just a little too tightly. His eyes flicked to the bottom, my signature beside the corporate seal. He said nothing. Blake leaned over his shoulder, reading, then frowned. This is a joke. Anyone could fake this. Feel free to verify it, I said. The acquisition was reported, quietly, but it's traceable if you know where to look. My financial advisor can confirm. More silence. Then my mother spoke again. Emma, she said with a smile so tight it could crack glass. You've always had an active imagination, but this is too much. Please sit down before you embarrass yourself. I'm not embarrassed, I said. For the first time, I'm not embarrassed at all. My father's voice came next, quiet, cutting. Get out. The air shifted. I stared at him. What? You've humiliated this family, he said, rising slowly. You storm in here, disrupt Thanksgiving, flaunt some document no one can verify, and accuse us, your family, of ignoring you. You've always been dramatic, Emma, but this crosses a line. It's the truth. Then you should have told us like an adult, privately, not this circus. He pointed toward the door. If you can't behave with dignity, you don't belong at this table. You want independence? Have it. My mouth went dry. Are you serious? You're not a Reynolds anymore. The words landed harder than I expected, not because I wanted the name, but because deep down I'd always hoped it might mean something, that maybe one day I could earn it. Not through marriage or career or obedience, but through being myself. Now I knew. I wasn't part of this family. Not really. Not ever. I picked up the paper, folded it back into my clutch, and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Not even Sophie. At the threshold, I paused. Thanks for the wine, I said quietly. You'll want to save the bottle. It's worth more than the central control panel. Layers of encrypted access, hidden behind decoy firms and blind trusts. 12 minutes later, the work was done. Every anonymous grant, monthly deposit, clerical error fund that had quietly kept the Reynolds family afloat, gone. I terminated the support structure for Blake's mortgage, refinancing, withdrew the shadow capital that had kept Sophie's boutique running, and cancelled the endowment cover for my parents' country club dues. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. They had made their position clear. So had I. I closed the laptop and sat for a long time in the dark, sipping tea that had long gone cold. By noon the next day, the consequences began. It started with Sophie. Emma, she hissed over voicemail, did you do something with the boutique account? My lease payment bounced and my landlord's threatening legal action. I don't know what's going on, but this is not funny. Then Blake. I picked up that call, mostly out of morbid curiosity. Did you pull your name off the Capital Group? He snapped. The bank flagged it. I missed my margin call, Emma. That's thousands in penalties. I could lose half my portfolio. I thought you didn't need my help, I said evenly. This isn't about pride. This is about responsibility. Family, I laughed. Funny. That word didn't come up last night when Dad kicked me out of it. He hung up. I heard from Claire, my cousin, next. She wasn't even directly part of the drama, just a bystander who had received tuition help for her daughter through an educational angel fund I'd created. The scholarship vanished, she said, quietly over email. No warning. I'm not asking for anything, but... Was it you? If it was, thank you. Truly. It meant everything. That message almost broke me, but I reminded myself I had tried to give silently, generously. I had tried to love them in a language they understood. Money, security, invisibility. They'd spat it back in my face. Later that afternoon, my mother called. Emma, she began, her voice uncharacteristically tight. The bank froze our utilities account, and the landscaper said the retainer vanished. Is this another one of your statements? No, I said. This is closure. Her voice trembled. We're your parents. I know. She waited for a long pause, expecting something else. Some backpedal, an offer, a crack in my resolve. It didn't come. Your father's under enormous pressure, she added. His firm is restructuring. He's not himself. He was exactly himself, I said. Last night was the most honest he's ever been. Silence. Emma, she said finally, this could hurt all of us. I know, I repeated, softer, but for the first time, I'm choosing to let it. That night, I opened a private bottle of wine, not the Lafite I'd brought to dinner, but something more modest, still special. I drank it in silence, not in celebration, but in relief. I had cut the cord, and with it, I could finally breathe. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I got a call from Jonathan Wells, my financial advisor and long-time legal liaison. I need you to look at something, he said, skipping pleasantries. A bank flagged a discrepancy in a credit line tied to your old Stanford residence address. It's connected to a trust. One you've never reported, but it's using your signature. My stomach dropped. What kind of credit line? $250,000, secured against a fake LLC in your name, issued 18 months ago. I blinked. That's impossible. I haven't opened anything like that. Jonathan cleared his throat. Emma, it's your signature on the authorization. And just like that, my memory snapped back. The papers Sophie had brought, the ones I'd signed to help speed up her condo closing. I'd barely skimmed them, too tired to read through the legalese. I'd trusted her, but they hadn't just been about a condo. They'd been about giving someone power of attorney. I pulled up the scan from my document archive. There it was, my signature. My initials beside a paragraph I clearly hadn't understood at the time. Beneath that, another name, Richard E. Reynolds, my father. My own father had used my trust to secure a line of credit, without ever telling me. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I called Jonathan back. Can we prove intent? Yes, he said, especially if we dig into where the funds went. If it's personal use and not business related, it opens a case of fraud. At the very least, he misrepresented authority under a forged impression of consent. I want you to begin an audit, I said. Today, he didn't ask questions. He just said, understood. The rage came in waves, not just because of the money, not even the betrayal, but because he hadn't even tried to ask. He'd bypassed me, exploited me, all while mocking my career to anyone who'd listen. It was theft wrapped in condescension. I paced the apartment, fists clenched, replaying every conversation we'd ever had about responsibility, earning your place, building legacy. Legacy? He was building a paper throne on lies and using my name as one of the bricks. Then my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. Emma, she said quickly, I know things have been tense, but we need to talk, please. I didn't respond. It's about your father. He's not well. There's pressure. The firm is collapsing. There are creditors, lawsuits pending. We could lose everything. A pause. Can you help? I sat down, my breath shallow. You want me to fix this? Her voice cracked. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for the family. The same family that erased me, she didn't reply. Did you know, I asked, about the trust, the fake credit line, the forged signature? She hesitated, then softly, not exactly. Not exactly, I repeated. You either knew or you didn't. I knew he was using your name for leverage. But I didn't think it would matter. You never said you needed anything. We thought you wouldn't notice. My heart clenched, not because of her words, but because she said them like they were reasonable. We thought you wouldn't notice. They had counted on my silence, my absence, my habit of letting things go. They had weaponized my distance as permission. I can't help, I said. Emma, please. I already did, I snapped, for years, quietly, generously, and it only made you hungrier. She sighed. If you won't do it for us, at least do it for Sophie. She's terrified. And Blake, he's unravelling. A pause. You're the only one strong enough. I swallowed hard. Strong enough? That was rich. They hadn't said a word about strength when I was drowning in student debt or living on instant soup. Now that their kingdom was crumbling, they saw me as the pillar. Not the daughter, not the woman, just a pillar. I'll think about it, I said flatly, then ended the call. I stared at the phone for a long time, my reflection warped in the black screen. They hadn't apologised. Not really. They were just afraid of the world where they had to stand without me. And for once, I wasn't afraid to let them fall. The invitation came via group email, dressed up in formal language. A Reynolds family meeting, urgent and private. Location, my parents' estate. Time, Sunday afternoon. Subject line, Unity in Crisis. I almost deleted it. Then I read the fine print, sent by Aunt Lillian, the family's unofficial PR manager. It mentioned clarifying misunderstandings, re-establishing trust, and moving forward as a unit. No mention of my name. No mention of my father's misconduct. No apology, just spin. I should have ignored it, should have blocked the sender and moved on, but curiosity, it always gets you in the end. So I went. I didn't arrive early, I didn't arrive late. I arrived on time, dressed in slate grey slacks, a tailored black blouse, and a coat that meant business. My briefcase was light but full. Documents, records, emails, bank statements, screenshots, truth. When I entered, the room quieted, like someone had dropped a glass. They didn't expect me. My father was seated at the head of the dining table, flanked by Blake and Uncle Robert. My mother stood near the fireplace, wringing her hands in delicate white gloves, like it was a funeral. Sophie looked like she hadn't slept in days. The rest of the family, cousins, aunts, second cousins, twice removed, were seated in various degrees of discomfort. I set my briefcase on the table, clicked it open, and began laying out the papers. No one spoke. Then Aunt Lillian, ever the diplomat, smiled and broke the silence. Emma, thank you for coming. We were hoping to resolve a few misunderstandings. Misunderstandings, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. My father leaned forward. We don't need drama. This is about fixing the future. The future you gambled away using my name. He stiffened. I turned to the room. Just so we're clear, this isn't about misunderstandings. It's about misappropriated funds, fraud, exploitation. I handed a folder to Aunt Lillian. This is a copy of the credit line opened in my name, using a forged power of attorney document I was tricked into signing. Murmurs broke out. I passed another stack to Uncle Robert. And these are records of my financial support to various members of this family, anonymous payments totaling over $800,000 in the last 3 years. Gasps. My mother paled. And finally, I said, setting down the thickest folder, this is an audit trail that shows how my father solicited investment opportunities from extended relatives to cover his firm's growing losses, promising guaranteed returns through projects that didn't exist. The room went quiet, dead quiet. Then Uncle Robert stood. Richard, is this true? My father shifted uncomfortably. That's a gross mischaracterization. Did you or did you not ask my wife to liquidate her pension for a tech expansion fund that never materialized? My father didn't answer. Cousin Daniel stood next. You told me to put $10,000 into that same fund, said it was a safe, family-backed venture. Voices rose. Accusations spilled. Some shouted, some cried. I watched in silence as the house of cards collapsed, layer by layer, lie by lie. Sophie buried her face in her hands. Blake muttered something about lawyers. My mother leaned against the fireplace mantel, visibly trembling. The room spiraled into chaos. Relatives demanding refunds, some calling their banks, others turning to me for confirmation, for guidance, for leadership. But I wasn't their saviour, not anymore. I had come with facts, not forgiveness. And for once, that was enough. As the arguments escalated, my father rose slowly from his seat. Despite the chaos around him, he straightened his spine, adjusted his cufflinks, and lifted his voice above the din. Enough. The room fell quiet, though tension still crackled in the air. He looked at me, jaw clenched. You've made your point, Emma, but let's not pretend this is some noble crusade. If you hadn't been so self-righteous, so eager to make a statement, we wouldn't be here. You walked away when this family needed you. I stared at him. You mean when you kicked me out? You could have called, offered support, quietly, like family does? A few heads nodded, uncertain, sheepish. It was the reflex of old conditioning. The patriarch speaks. The family aligns. I did support you, I said, voice flat. For years, anonymously. You praised God for mysterious windfalls while mocking me to my face. He waved a hand. That was pride. I was protecting your image. I didn't want people to think we were dependent on you. I opened my briefcase again and pulled out one last document. I hadn't planned to use it, not today, but now it felt necessary. This, I said, unfolding the file, is a report from my legal team. It traces funds funneled through a non-profit foundation you created, Reynolds Future Scholars. Several relatives turned toward him, confused. A scholarship fund? Aunt Lillian asked. I thought that was for inner city students. It was, I replied. On paper. In reality, less than 5% of donations reached any students. The rest was redirected to cover private investments, shell companies owned by Blake and Sophie, and even a fake consulting firm registered to Mum's maiden name. Gasps echoed around the room. I gave to that fund, Uncle Robert whispered. $5,000 last Christmas. So did we, said another cousin. We thought it was real. My father's expression didn't waver. Creative accounting. It's legal. Barely, I said, and ethically it's a disgrace. Then came the moment I didn't expect. My mother let out a strangled sob. All heads turned. She sank slowly into the armchair beside the fireplace, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. I knew, she whispered, not all the details, but I knew enough. What? Sophie said, stunned. He told me it was just temporary, my mother continued, that it was for appearances, that we'd fix it once things stabilised. You knew? I repeated. You let him use my name, let him funnel money. You stayed quiet through all of it? She looked up at me, her eyes rimmed red, but strangely composed. I was afraid, she said, afraid of what would happen if the truth came out, of what people would say. The reputation we spent decades building, it would have crumbled. A fresh wave of silence swept the room. No one knew where to look. My throat burned. This wasn't just about money. It never had been. It was about the rot beneath the facade. The way this family had clung to image over integrity, status over sincerity. My mother's tears weren't for me. They were for the reputation she'd finally lost. I scanned the room. Faces I'd known my whole life stared back at me. Some ashamed, some angry, some just stunned. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I came for truth, and now you have it. I gathered the papers, clicked my briefcase shut, and stood. You can do what you want with it. Deny it, fight it, fix it. I don't care anymore. As I walked to the door, no one stopped me, not even my mother, not this time. I hadn't planned to turn back, but as I stepped outside, the heavy door creaking closed behind me, Sophie's voice rang out. Emma, wait, I paused. She ran to catch up, breath ragged, heels forgotten in her hand. Her mascara had smudged, and for once she looked less like a curated socialite and more like someone real. I need to talk to you, she said. I crossed my arms. Now? I didn't know about the scholarship thing, or Dad using your name, I swear. I searched her face for truth and found something closer to desperation than deception. Then why come after me for a signature? I asked, her cheeks flushed. Because I knew you wouldn't say no. There it was, not malice, just calculation, I sighed. You can apologise, but that doesn't fix what's broken. I don't want to fix it with an apology, she said. I want to earn it back. She pulled a folded document from her coat pocket, unsigned forms to dissolve her interior design company. I'm shutting it down. I'm starting over, I blinked. I applied to a teaching program, she continued, voice cracking. Child development, early education, something real. I didn't speak, I just nodded slowly. Back inside, the house was eerily quiet. Most of the extended family had left, citing headaches, kids, or other commitments. Only the core remained, my parents, Blake, Sophie, and a few silent observers on the fringe. I have one condition, I said as I re-entered. All eyes turned. If you want my help, any of it, it happens on my terms. My father scoffed from across the room. I ignored him. I'll fund a recovery trust, transparent, audited monthly, overseen by a third-party board with no Reynolds family members involved. My mother flinched. I'll contribute enough to keep things from collapsing, I continued. But the moment my father's name appears on anything, any document, email, account, it's over. My father stood abruptly, knocking his glass to the floor. It shattered. You think you can dictate terms? He spat. You wouldn't even have that money without us, without this name. I tilted my head. You mean the name you revoked last week? Blake, who had been silent for most of the meeting, finally stepped forward. This is pathetic, he growled. You're dangling power in front of us like we're beggars. No, I said calmly. I'm offering a lifeline. He stepped closer. We don't need you. Blake, my mother warned softly, but he wasn't listening. His fists clenched. His breath grew shallow. You walk in here with your perfect plans, your perfect conditions, acting like some kind of saviour. You think you're better than us? No, I said quietly. I just know who I am. That pushed him over the edge. In one motion, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pocket knife, a reflex gesture from childhood camping trips, but this time it wasn't playful. Say that again, he hissed. Everyone froze. My heart rate didn't even spike. I was beyond fear. Put it down, I said. Sophie cried out. Blake, stop. My mother covered her mouth. My father didn't move. I held his gaze. You won't use it, I said, because if you do, this family loses everything. Reputation, access, control, everything you care about. His hand shook. You already lost, I added, the moment you underestimated me. Then, slowly, Blake dropped the knife to the floor. It clattered against the marble like a gavel. Sophie collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My mother retreated behind the curtains. My father stared at the blade, then at me, and for the first time, he looked small. I bent down, picked up the knife, and placed it on the table between us. You're right, I told them. I'm not better than you. But I am done being beneath you. The police arrived faster than I expected. I hadn't raised my voice when I called. I hadn't cried or begged or dramatised. I simply gave them the address, explained that a member of my family had threatened me with a weapon in front of witnesses, and said I wanted to file a formal report. They asked if I was safe. Yes, I said. Now, 2 officers entered the house a few minutes later, their presence scattering the last bits of illusion like dust. Blake's face drained of colour. "I didn't hurt anyone," he said, holding his hands up. "It wasn't even open. I wasn't going to use it." "That's not what matters," I replied. My voice was calm, clinical. "You threatened someone with a weapon, in public, in front of witnesses." Sophie tried to intervene, her voice trembling. "She's his sister. Please, can't we just—" One officer gently held up a hand. "Ma'am, we understand, but the law doesn't bend for family." My mother said nothing. She remained seated, hands folded tightly in her lap, watching the scene like it was a bad television show she couldn't turn off. Blake was escorted out of the house. They didn't handcuff him, but the shame wrapped tighter than any chain. My father disappeared during the commotion. No dramatic goodbye, no final argument. He simply vanished, out the back maybe, or through one of the side doors he always used to avoid talking to guests. It felt fitting. The man who built a legacy on presence left with absence. After the officers departed, the house grew impossibly quiet. I stood for a moment in the foyer, my hands brushing the smooth curve of the staircase banister I'd slid down 100 times as a kid. Everything around me looked the same, polished, preserved, but nothing felt the same anymore. My mother still hadn't moved. She stared at the broken wine glass on the floor, or maybe at the emptiness behind it. "You didn't have to call the police," she whispered. I turned. "He pulled a knife on me." "But he's your brother." "No," I said softly. "He's a grown man who made a choice." Silence stretched between us like a chasm neither of us could cross. She looked up at me. Her eyes, always so sharp and practiced, had dulled. "I never wanted it to turn out like this." I nodded. Neither did I. But we both knew better. There had always been a reckoning coming. It just took longer than expected. I reached for the doorknob. My fingers rested there for a moment, as if waiting for something, maybe a word, maybe a reason to stay. None came. "I'll have my attorney send over the trust documentation next week," I said. "If you choose to use it, great. If not, that's your call." She nodded faintly. "Okay. And tell Dad—" I stopped. "No, never mind." I opened the door. A breeze swept in, cool and clean. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip below the trees, casting gold over the concrete. I stepped through it, not rushing, not hesitating. I didn't look back. There was no weight on my shoulders this time. No guilt, no shame, just clarity. For the first time in my life, I walked away from that house without carrying any part of it with me. 6 months later, I woke to birdsong and the sound of water gently brushing the edges of my dock. The lake house in Vermont had been a dream I never allowed myself to articulate aloud, not until now. Nestled among pine and maple trees, it stood with simple elegance, glass walls, warm wood, interiors, and silence broken only by nature. No marble, no pretense, no ghosts. I padded barefoot across the living room, coffee in hand, watching the morning light spread over the lake like gold leaf. This was my world now. No expectations, no scripts, just choice. After breakfast, I opened my laptop and logged into the dashboard for Empower Her, the foundation I'd launched just 3 months earlier. The screen lit up with updates. 3 new scholarship applications, 2 mentee-mentor matches, and a success story flagged from social media. One of our girls had just placed top 5 in a national robotics competition. I smiled. The foundation was doing more than I'd hoped. We provided full scholarships, laptops, housing stipends, and mentorship to young women in STEM from underrepresented backgrounds, girls who reminded me of myself, Awkward, intense, brilliant, and deeply underestimated. And I wasn't doing it alone. "Emma?" Sophie's voice called from the guest suite. "Kitchen," I replied. She entered moments later, hair tied up, glasses slipping down her nose, already balancing a notepad, tablet, and protein bar. She was learning, not just about the logistics of non-profit work, but about herself. "I uploaded the new grant agreement," she said, sliding into a chair. "And the Denver applicant, she's got insane potential. That app she built for students with dyslexia. Genius." I nodded. "She's shortlisted for our spring cohort." Sophie grinned. "Told you." There was no pretense between us anymore. No need to perform. She had closed the design firm, sold her condo, and moved in with me for a few months while she studied part-time and helped manage operations. It wasn't always smooth, but it was honest. And that mattered more. After lunch, I checked the mail, real mail, which I rarely did. Tucked between envelopes from donors and thank you notes from students was a cream-coloured envelope with familiar handwriting, my mother's. I froze. The last time we spoke was the day I walked out of the family home. Blake in handcuffs and my father missing in action. I carried the letter to the back porch and opened it slowly. Her handwriting was elegant, measured, still perfect. "Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. But I wanted to write this with my own hand, not from a keyboard or a lawyer's desk. Because you deserve that. I've spent the last few months unravelling a lot of things, truths I ignored, lies I helped preserve, and the image I built my life around. And in all that unravelling, one thing has become painfully clear. You were the only one brave enough to be honest. While the rest of us chased optics, you chased meaning. You lived with integrity. You built something real. And even when we didn't see it, especially when we didn't see it, you never stopped being yourself. That's something I never had the courage to do. You are not a disappointment. You never were. You're the only Reynolds who didn't perform, who lived truthfully. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Love, Mom. I read it twice. Then folded it and set it beside my coffee. I didn't cry, but something in me settled. Not closure, exactly, but clarity. Sophie joined me on the porch a few minutes later. "Good letter?" she asked, eyeing the envelope. "Honest," I said. She nodded, and we sat in silence, watching the lake breathe under the breeze. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. This life, this quiet, deliberate, unflashy life, was mine, and I had earned it. 2 days after my mother's letter arrived, another envelope appeared, this one thinner, cheaper, handwritten in uneven print. The return address was somewhere in rural Ohio. I slit it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. "Dear Ms. Reynolds, you don't know me, but I know you. Or at least I know what you did. My name is Jaya. I'm 16. I go to a public high school that doesn't even have a working printer in the library. My mum works 2 jobs, and my dad left when I was 8. I've always loved tech, but we couldn't afford Wi-Fi, let alone a computer. Then someone from a weird-sounding group called Empower Her showed up at school. Said there was a scholarship. Said it wasn't just about money. It was mentorship, laptops, real people who'd guide us. I thought it was a scam, but something about the way they talked made me listen. Last week, I got my acceptance email. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat on my bed and read it 20 times because I couldn't believe someone actually believed in me. You were the first person who ever did. I'm going to learn how to code. I'm going to build something, and someday I'll help someone like me the way you helped me. Thank you, Jaya M. I held the letter in my lap for a long time. This This was why I'd done it all, not to prove anything, not to get recognition, but because I remembered what it felt like to sit alone in your room, knowing you were capable of something great, if only someone would look your way and say, "Yes, I see you." I wrote back to Jaya that night. A full page. I told her she wasn't imagining her strength, that her instincts were right, that I couldn't wait to meet her in person. 3 weeks later, I boarded a train to Boston for a Women in Tech Summit. Empower Her had been invited to speak, and we were showcasing some of our student projects. Sophie would handle logistics. I would take the stage. The event was held at a glass-panelled hotel in the Seaport District. Hundreds of attendees, buzzed with energy, engineers, designers, founders, students. The air pulsed with purpose. After my panel, I drifted through the exhibitor floor, answering questions, shaking hands, watching girls like Jaya beam beside their demo stations. Then someone tapped my shoulder. "Emma Reynolds?" a man asked. Early 40s, clean-cut, crisp suit, warm eyes. "Yes," I said. "I saw your panel," he smiled. "Very impressive. The structure of your mentorship model, it's brilliant." "Thank you." We started talking, casual, professional. His name was Daniel. He worked in financial consulting, had experience with forensic audits, and had just moved to Boston from DC. He wasn't flirtatious, just attentive. We talked about AI bias, startup ethics, the perils of venture capital for mission-driven founders. It was the kind of conversation that made time melt. Eventually, Sophie called me over to help with cleanup. I thanked him for the chat, and he handed me a card. "No pressure," he said. "Just, if you ever want to talk more about systemic accountability and kombucha flavours." I laughed. "That's a strangely specific offer." He winked. "I'm a strangely specific guy." Later that night, back in my hotel room, I looked at the card again. Daniel Park, independent financial analyst and consultant. What I didn't know then, what I'd find out months later, was that Daniel wasn't just a consultant. He was part of a federal task force, quietly investigating high-level financial misconduct in family-run investment firms, including the Reynolds Group, including my father. Our first meeting had been coincidence, but he'd known the name, my story, the rumours of money trails that didn't add up. But what surprised him and what changed everything was me. I wasn't part of the game. I was the anomaly, the one who stepped away rather than cash in. By the time I learned the full truth, Daniel and I had already shared 10 more conversations. 3 long walks, 1 unexpected kiss under an awning during a rainstorm. When he confessed, apologetically carefully, I just smiled. "Did you think I'd be angry?" "A little," he admitted. "You had every right to be." "I'm not," I said, "because the truth? I didn't mind being seen anymore, not for who they thought I should be, but for who I actually was. Emma Reynolds. Tech founder. Mentor. Daughter. Survivor. And maybe, just maybe, someone starting to believe in second chances." I looked out the train window on the ride home, Jaya's letter tucked in my journal, Daniel's card in my pocket, and the future stretching open like tracks into the horizon. This wasn't a comeback. It wasn't a revenge arc. It was a rebirth, and this time it was mine.